Just a little while ago, I sat down and watched my first Bond film. I wanted to jump on after having seen the trailer for No Time to Die, which I thought looked good. Looking online, I saw Casino Royale was a good place to start, as it was the beginning of a reboot for the franchise. Right away, I'll say that at times, the movie just completely lost me. I wouldn't say that it was objectively hard to follow, just at times I would get confused. It was a long movie that packed in quite a lot, and so things felt like they were happening really fast. On top of that, this movie has this 2000s decade visual style to it, which isn't objectively bad, it's just something I don't like. Every decade has a go to visual style film. I mean, look at the 90s, 80s, and so on. But when it comes to that 2000 style, the best word I can think of to use to describe it is just bland. It's really hard to describe, but it's something I usually notice and that I just don't like. But the biggest problem I had with Casino Royale was that it felt like, despite being a starting point, that you had to be a James Bond fan going into it. A lot of this movie felt like an homage to older Bond films, or like it was following this James Bond guidebook and checklist they did. It felt more like Casino Royale was being made for Bond fans, the newcomers. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just wasn't able to appreciate it because going into it, I wasn't a Bond fan. There were things I did like about Casino Royale though. I loved the whole part of the movie where James Bond was just playing cards. I loved how much of this movie was dedicated to that. It was really entertaining to watch him go up against a bad guy in this way and setting versus some flashy fist fight or gunfight. Also, Matt Mickelson was great, and I came to like Daniel Craig too when I realized that the point of his character was that at first, he has no character. Anyways, I gave Casino Royale 2 out of 5 stars. It had its moments, but in the end, I just had trouble enjoying it and following it. Things came off as weird and sudden to me, I found the action uninteresting, and I hated the overall bland 2000s look and feel this movie had. But I will say, as a quick side note, that as the movie sits with me over time, I'm looking back on it more fondly than when I watched it. And now on to the movie I just watched, Quantum of Solace, the sequel to Casino Royale. Right from the start, I liked it better because it didn't have that bland 2000s look. But then the action began, and this movie's biggest problem became apparent. In every action scene in this movie, there are ungodly amounts of cuts in unbelievably short amounts of time. Every action scene was so hard to follow because it would constantly cut away to another shot for half a second before cutting to something else. Sometimes it was a different angle, sometimes it was in objects that sometimes we probably didn't even need to follow, and sometimes it was just pointless. I remember seeing an old lady once, I think. I mean, Bond would be chasing a guy, and then all of a sudden they were on the roof because I couldn't even follow these shots well enough to remember how they got there while I was watching it. It might have gotten a little, and I mean a little, better by the end of the movie, but I honestly think I just gotten used to it at that point. It got to a point where I just wanted to skip over the action scenes entirely so I could get back to watching the movie. And yes, I did kind of enjoy watching this movie. I think this partially has to do with having watched Casino Royale and changing my expectations for the next Bond movie. But while I enjoyed watching the non-action parts of this movie, for the most part, I wasn't super into it. It wasn't bad, it was just nothing. It had its moments, but overall, I didn't enjoy it much more than I did Casino Royale. And even if I enjoyed watching it more than I did Casino Royale, I feel like Casino Royale might have been better and just had more to offer when thinking back on it. Quantum of Solace really was a movie where I came to dread the action, where the story didn't have that much interest at all, and really just depended on a few good moments and scenes. And so that really just leaves a, for the most part, pretty boring movie I was able to sit through only because it was a Bond movie. I give Quantum of Solace a 2.5 out of 5 stars. All that being said, somehow I'm starting to warm up to the Bond franchise. I'm growing attached to these recurring characters like CIA operative Felix, played by Jeffrey Wright. For some reason, I really like that character and his relationship to Bond. Also, I really like the villains in these movies. They aren't just these bad guys looking for a fight. They're these corrupt men who conjure up these truly evil, sinister schemes, like bombing a plane to affect the stock market or buying an island so that you can control the water supply and make money off of it. So I look forward to watching the next movie in the franchise and maybe even eventually going back and watching some of the older Bond movies. And that's it.